What's going on, everybody? Let's do an update on this aquarium that holds water with salt added to it. So everything's looking good. Ran a test on it a couple times this week. Zero ammonia, zero nitrites, and very, very little nitrates. Um, so everything's looking good. There's the two clownfish in here and one peppermint shrimp, and everything's working out good. As you can see, I got my switches labeled. So first up is the MP10, then I got the RW4, then I have the skimmer, and then we got the auto top off, and then we have, which the plug's empty, but a reactor, and then the last port is with the switch is just going to a pump for mixing water, and then the last switch on this entire strip is just a dedicated power, and it's got my cabinet light on it. So I know what goes where, but it makes it a lot easier labeled. I might wake up one day and not have a clue what's going on, so I have it labeled. I know what to turn off when I need to turn it off, and it makes it a lot easier for feeding and whatnot. I did one modification, not in the video, so I'll have to update that at a later time. But I was able to move the sensor 1 float switch to the return chamber of the aquarium. And it was stated in one of my comments below in a previous video that the sensor was in the wrong chamber. And it was working for quite a while. The skimmer chamber and the return chamber were staying the same level, but for the sake of keeping my salinity the way that I need it at 2.5 or 2.6, the way that I'd want it anyway, I was able to move that sensor into the return chamber. And it took a little bit of work, but nonetheless, I got it in there and I've tested it out multiple times, and everything's good to go. I still do need to try to wrap up some of these cables in there. It's a complete mess or whatever, but I'll deal with it. You close the door and you can no longer see any of that stuff, so it's not going to be the end of the world for me. But yeah, these guys are doing awesome. They're eating really well. I'm feeding them just a little bit twice a day, and as soon as I drop that food into the water, they're up at the top of the water, grabbing the food as quickly as it goes into the tank, and the shrimp actually will come out at that point and start searching for food. So I've also started to try to configure the Spectral Controller for the light. Up until this point, I've not been running the controller whatsoever. Excuse me, but with the plans to add coral in the very near future, I decided it was time for me to kind of get familiar with this controller, and it's really awesome. You have the ramp up and ramp down times versus just an on-off switch, whatever. To me, it was worth $100 to have the ramping up and down and the acclimation period and everything. It's a nice added benefit to this controller. And most people, and I'll be in that same boat where I won't run the intensity, probably not even half. We'll say 60% maybe. It just depends on the coral and the placement of them, I guess, is going to be really the deciding factor. But all in all, really glad I got the controller for the light. Well worth it. So if you have the Kessel A160 or any of the Kessels, the newer Kessels, I guess, that accept the controller, I highly recommend the controller. I probably should do a firmware update on it at some point, but right now it's at least to my concern. I just need to get it set up, and I'm not really too fond of the military time for whatever reason, but I know how to count and I can adjust to it. I can make it work. I think I was just playing around and I set it on that quick set 4. It was one of the settings that I created on there. And for the purpose of the video, I got the blues turned down on there, so it makes things a little bit easier for the camera to catch. So, like I said, these clownfish are doing great. They're really, really small. It's a small tank. It's a nano tank. It's 27 gallons with quite a bit of rock in there. And again, for whatever reason, the video's not repeating, but I showed the switches to turn off on and off the peripherals. But this is what I'm feeding the clownfish. This is what I picked up at the local fish store, and it's pretty cool because it's made in Tennessee. And I've heard of sustainable aquatics before, but I've never used any of these pellets or whatever. Never heard of really any of the products that they've offered. I just knew that they were a store that offered things to sell, for lack of a better term. But I'm trying to carefully put the food into the tank. I don't want to dump a bunch of it in there. But as you can see, as soon as I drop food in there, these guys are all over it. And it's a good sign. It's a really good sign that hopefully we won't have any issues, but you never know what's going to happen in a reef tank. That's what I've learned for sure. And on a side note, this video doesn't capture it or whatever, but I am, since I didn't run my light at all with during the cycle or whatever, I am getting diatoms now, and I don't know what that film is on the tank. It seems to do that whenever I don't have that RW4 creating the surface agitation on there or whatever. So disregard the film. If you remember earlier in the video, there was a slot for a reactor. Cough, cough. That reactor should fix whatever this film is. It's just a nuisance to me. It's basically all it is. It's really nothing to be concerned about. One little peppermint shrimp comes out every once in a while. It's a very fun little guy, minus the fact that you don't really ever get to see him very often. He pretty well stays hidden, and it's been different having livestock in the tank because before I had the MPTM full blast and RW4 full blast as far as water movement was concerned, and having livestock in the tank, I've had to turn them down quite a bit. So, once again, whenever I add coral to the tank, we'll reevaluate where the flow exactly needs to be at in the tank. But the shrimp is really cool. Whenever he comes out, he's a fun guy to watch. Picked up a lid for a bucket, $2 lid for a $3 bucket, so a $5 auto top-off container, drilled a hole in it, and dropped the hose in there. And this thing evaporates water pretty rapidly. There's not a vent directly over top of the tank, but it's pretty close to it. And it went through 4 gallons in a week. And to me, that kind of seems excessive because I've heard of larger tanks maybe doing a gallon or 2 a day, which is basically what this is doing. This is the inside of the JBJ Auto Top Off. If you do not know anything about the JBJ Auto Top Off, you can take the back of it off, and it actually has an on and off for an audible alarm. So it comes factory off. Mine did anyway. But if you turn it on, what'll happen is it'll beep. It'll either beep or do a constant sound. I'm not sure. I'm not turning it on, but it'll do that when the pump is on. And what I was showing you there is a dial. And what that dial there does at the top of the auto top off, it turns the pump on and off. So if your float switch has been activated, if your number 1 float switch has been activated, what'll happen is whatever that's set at is how long the pump will run. And if the pump is running up until that point, the pump will shut off. It's just a safety feature. So it'll go from 3 minutes all the way up to, it looks like 7 minutes or whatever. I was kind of running into an issue where 3 minutes wasn't long. If I'm using a Tom's Aqua Lifter, and that doesn't put out a huge flow of water. It's a slow trickle. So I had to adjust the time a little bit. And if you've ever been on Melv's Reef, you can follow him on YouTube. You can check out his website. He was using and tried out these Cree lights over a Refugium. And so I went and picked up a couple LED lights and a snap light, which is what I have in my hand. I just took the shroud off of it and the snap. And I'm going to utilize the Refugium. And instead of spending $100 on a light, I decided to go this route. Seems like people have had a pretty good um, growth out of microalgae with these lights at 5000 K. That's the one issue with this light is it's slotted. It is a LED technology, so it will not get hot or whatever, but it does have the slots inside of there. So that is one thing to pay attention to whenever you mount this light over water. My my refugium does not have a huge amount of flow in it, so there will not be any splashing. So I'll be able to lower it pretty close to the water. Um, and I also picked up another bulb just in case, just to, I guess, test it out. Um, I plan on running the Cree light from the get-go, and this Philips light is basically the same thing. I think it was actually a couple bucks cheaper, which is why I picked it up also. So um, I talked to a gentleman by the name of 915 Mang. Um, if you're not following him on Instagram or YouTube, I highly recommend it. He's helped me out a lot, and he's actually supposed to be sending me some Cheeto Morpho, whatever the name is. He's supposed to be sending me some. So props. Check him out if you haven't checked him out. So this is a mount that I've made for that light. I didn't want to use the clamp simply because I wanted the light above, or excuse me, off of the sump, not mounted to the sump in any way. So it just makes it a little bit easier for me to get in and out of there, I guess, for lack of a better term. And I wanted something a little bit more permanent. So what I've done here, if you ever mount anything above your head in a small space, use double-sided tape. The double-sided tape is not a permanent fixture, but what the double-sided tape will do is it'll hold whatever you're trying to screw in. Well, it should, pending it doesn't weigh a ton, but it should hold it there long enough for you to put screws in it. To give it the security that it really needs. So there was no way that I was putting this in the stand and thinking that double-sided tape was actually going to secure this with a light bulb that has electricity over a tub of water, thinking that I wasn't going to fry myself or whatever. Who's that guy from the I cannot think of that movie. The bald guy that's in the bathtub and he throws a toaster in there and you can light a light bulb up from his mouth, whatever. But here, I just took electric tape and taped up the edges simply because I'm going to be zip tying a power cord to this. And I figured that the electric tape would help kind of shield the metal so it wouldn't be sharp. So you can see I used the double-sided tape, but then I also put 2 screws in there to hold it. And it's a light bulb. It doesn't weigh very much, but there was no way that I was trusting that double-sided tape to hold this light bulb over this water. And salt water, if you don't know, this is the drill that I use. It's a drill. It's a as seen for TV drill. I got it as a dirty Santa gift from my sister-in-law, and I love this drill. Um, it worked perfect because it's an automatic drill, but it worked perfect in this application because it was so hard for me to get to. I was not going to get any other drill up in this cabinet, and I've used that thing a ton. Um, that's the Cree LED there. But what I was going to say about salt water is I'm not an electrician. I don't know the specifics on it, but from what I've read, salt water conducts electricity. So if you get salt water in an outlet or whatever, for sure stay away from it. It is not like fresh water where it'll trip the breaker. Apparently, it'll travel through salt water, which can be very deadly, very bad, turn bad quick. So here you can see I have the light over the refugium, and I probably need to lower it a little bit, but you can see how bright it is. It's a 5000 K light, and the one thing that I don't like about this sump is the white acrylic baffles and dividers because I can't see the rear chambers. But what I do like about it in this particular setup is the fact that whenever I lower this light, that light will not, with the white baffles in there, it will not be able to penetrate to any other areas and create algae or unwanted nuisance. Also went to the local fish store today. They got this big beast in. Um, it was a beautiful fish. They got multiple fish in today, so it was pretty cool. Also went to the Cheesecake Factory, so I had to show you that I picked up a whole Reese's cheesecake, um, and I'm probably going to demolish it all Super Bowl. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more updates.